right? It's almost like it's something on the balance sheet. That
Hell, 100,000% yes.
Yeah. And yet, it's just... Hello and welcome to episode 175 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday the 15th of July. I hope you are well, you've had a great week, and you are staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but with this podcast, I want to share the marketing street knowledge I've picked up on my journey from sysadmin to CMO with the help of some true rockstars. My guests and chums who I hope will inspire the marketing rockstar in you. You can find links to me, the guests, and all the things we talk about in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, along with our Street Knowledge blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. This week in the marketing studio, Jeff Clark and I discuss B2B influencers. I welcome back Todd Irwin, Chief Strategy Officer and founder of New York-based brand strategy and creative agency Phaser. And I wind down the week with my chum Robert Rose in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar for a cocktail and a marketing food. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, our resident Rockstar CMO strategy advisor and former Forrester research director.
Ian Truscott, come on in. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Yes, I think I understand your travels have put you a tad under the weather.
Yes, I travelled to the Netherlands and I picked up a souvenir which was COVID. So which is weird because this podcast was started as a reaction to COVID.
You're right.
170, and this is episode 175, and it's back. So luckily I am relatively okay to talk. I think there might be a sneeze, might be a sniff, there might be a cough, but I'll try and suppress all of those things. Anyway,
awesome.
Thank you, mate. How's you? And how's the weather?
Things are going well. As we were discussing and preparing for a family trip, and right now we're having typical hot summer weather. We actually had just gotten tremendous torrential rainstorms, which are causing flooding and problems all over New England, and so you may have heard of those on the news. But in our little patch, we're doing okay.
Had the same in Europe last week. In the Netherlands, there are loads of roads shut. We are suffering some rain right now, so yeah, we've had a very damp July so far, for sure. Anyway, let's crack on to what we're going to talk about. Although, obviously, my health and the weather are very important.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sure you're fascinated, listener, to this. Anyway, last week we talked about the 5, and are they personas or are they archetypes? I thought it was interesting. Anyway, we talked
archetypal about personas. I just came upon that when I was thinking about this episode.
Yeah, and then as we tripped through those, we nearly fell down a rabbit hole on talking about influencers simply because we've got a fair amount of experience there. People like analysts, press, bloggers, and that sort of thing. And so I think last week we promised, well, we'll cover that next week, and let's dive into that. So that's what we're going to do. So let me start with you. I have to do I need to remember the script. So, Jeff, what say you? I've got a bit of brain fog.
Yeah, really. So, well, you said it was raining there, so I assume the fog comes in with that. But I mean, the first thing I think we just want to kind of cover. I mean, you kind of went down the list of who are influencers, but I mean, I think the thing that's interesting these days is that it used to be there was the media, there was the industry press that reviewed products and told people about them and all that, and then there was the industry analysts, so the Forrester, Gartners, on and on, IDCs, et cetera. And it's really, I think, it's really blossomed where, anybody can kind of set up their own shop and be a consultant, an analyst, a blogger, a podcaster, kind of like us, and mete out wisdom, with the obviously best practices people can follow, but then, engaging with an actual client and kind of helping them through some sort of buying process. And so influencing as a marketer, I think we both come to realize that influencing the influencers is an absolutely essential part of your marketing campaign strategy and your content strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we highlighted them as a persona. And I also think it's interesting now, whereas in, a few years ago, you'd have just said, this is covered by ARPR, right? But now it's, we're referring to this group as influencers. And I think increasingly B2B has always been great at influencers because we had that AR training, right, with analysts and stuff. But you've got to look beyond the classics, right? You've got to look to everybody who might be doing that.
I mean, every market's going to have some small set of people who are like everybody listens to, and you never know whether they're going to be a official analyst at a big firm or whether they're just an individual that again puts out their shingle and they're now advising clients.
That's right. And the world is so complicated today, isn't it, in terms of, especially around marketing technology and B2B marketing technology, that everybody needs some help. So we need to influence the influencers with our PR briefings and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not going to claim anything for these notes that you've put together, and I like the format that you've done. What you thought we would do is just share a bit of our experience of working with influencers, rather than our normal, lecture about here's the things you need to learn. Yeah. We'll come to that, absolutely. But what I was interested in, and when you suggested this idea, is just sharing what you've picked up in your career, Jeff, and maybe I'll share a little bit of what I've done as well. So when you've worked with influencers in the past, as a marketer, so the thing is, I think, as you pointed out at the beginning, right now we're bloggers and podcasters, but both of us, for people that don't know, are former analysts. So I was an analyst for a second tier analyst firm for a year called Gilbane Group, and you were obviously much more in the stars with serious decisions and Forrester.
The ivory tower, as it was often referred to.
Yeah. And of course, we both have marketing careers as well. So people know that I'm a CMO and you've had leadership positions in a number of MarTech companies and tech companies, really. Going to be tech companies that we've referred to as well. So with your marketing hat on, Jeff, what was the worst experience you had working with it? We'll just kick off on the positive. What's the worst experience you had working with an influencer or an analyst? What was
I know maybe starting with the bad news is not a good foot to stand. But then we end on the positive. That's what we need to think about. Well, so one of the things that just really stuck with me, and I was more tangentially involved as opposed to personally involved in the work in the AR work, is I worked at a company where we had created a product that was all about application integration. Back when kind of moving from point to point to more broader types of integration was a new thing, and we led. This product was number one in the market, defined as what was called the enterprise service bus. And the product was making money. I mean, we were putting out RFPs, we were answering RFPs, and we're growing that particular product line very, I think, doubling, every year for probably 2 or 3 years. And then as soon as we lost that leadership position which happened to be to IBM, and then a little bit later Oracle, the sales just dried up. And it was like, it was one of the things where, you can't get too hung up. I mean, it's important to have these analyst reviews and be a leader in your particular market, but little guys just will get squashed by market gorilla, partially because they've got more salespeople and things like that, but also because they do happen to have a little bit more leverage with the Gartners and the Forresters than the little guys do, and sometimes it just gets to a point where it's like whether they've helped shape the way the market is being defined, or they've helped shape how products should be evaluated, or they've just got more. A lot of it is your ability to execute. So they got more salespeople, more support, more whatever that they can, they can have successful customers. Then they're going to take that away from you. And I mean, that not just happened at the company. Not that I mentioned the company because I didn't want to do that, but I mean, my first tech job was working at a word processing company where we had the number one word processor rated by all the magazines, but we were a little teeny company. And we got squashed by Microsoft and then IBM and then blah, 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 blah. And so it's just it's a big cautionary tale, is that you can't just rely on those reviews. You got to be able to have the company has to have the ability to execute and continue to build a market.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're 9 minutes in already. And I think that's interesting, because the point there is not to put all your eggs into the Forrester Gartner, bucket, right, or basket, and that you need to think about other influencers in your market that are going to help you, right?
Yeah.
So if that well runs dry, then you've got another channel of influence, right?
Absolutely. So how about you, Ian? What's your worst experience or something you've learned from?
Oh, I have a few things, and they're not quite nicely structured as yours. I've had a CEO arguing with an analyst. So if you're going to put somebody in front of an analyst, you really need to make sure that they're media trained almost for that situation. I've had working with a different analyst firm, a smaller analyst firm, and I wanted to sponsor some of their work, and again, it's a bit of the CEO thing. They insisted that we work with one of their analysts that my CEO didn't like, so trying to get that. And they didn't really understand the nature of the relationship, right? I really would like to give you some money. And then the worst one was I worked with a small firm and they didn't deliver. And I also discovered they didn't pay their freelancers for the work that they did. So this is kind of a different set of lessons, is that okay, so with Forrester and Gartner, you know where you are and stuff. But if you are going outside of that, you need to be a bit careful about, who you're contracting with, and make sure that it's that, they're going to deliver on what they've promised, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, and also, I mean, an early example I had was an analyst who refused to engage with vendors. All they did was speak to customers, and they wrote something in their report that was completely untrue. And I could have showed them the code that showed it was untrue, but no, they didn't want to deal with it. So those are a few of my scars, but they're not quite as well structured as yours.
Scars rarely are.
yeah. So we move on to the next one. So Jeff, with your marketing hat on, what was the best experience you had working with an influencer?
I'm glad I get to keep my marketing hat on so I can shift later. So, I remember, and X was a company we both worked at, we were working with, so a number of people in the organization were working with a set of analysts to work on messaging. And it was all about, this kind of burgeoning space of customer experience offerings, when it was new and it was hot. I really learned a lot about getting the type of feedback needed for messaging. So I was more interested from the messaging side. So there are other people from the company doing briefings. I was on the listening end, and I would go in with questions about, if we position it like this, or if we say this or whatever, and you would get feedback. And they don't, I think one of the things that I really, I think I learned out of that is that you really got to be prepared, and you got to have really precise questions to kind of get the feedback you need or you want from them, because they're not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you what they've told other vendors necessarily. They're not going to divulge any secrets they may have, but if you ask the right question or you show them things, they'll give you the right feedback. And so I think that was That was a great learning experience for me.
Yeah, but that's also the point that I was making earlier about having the CEO in the room with the analysts. Is then you've got these two egos at play, right? And I think to your point about really understand what is a briefing and what is an inquiry, and when it's an inquiry, really listen, have those questions right, and just just let them speak, right? And just put any of your point of view aside for the moment. Let them speak, and then I once had it with. I should have put this in my words. There's one time where I had an argument with an analyst about what we thought the future of web content management was, and then next time we had a briefing with him, he told us what the future of WCM was, which is exactly what we described in the previous briefing. So
it worked. It worked. Yeah, it can work.
You can influence for sure. Yeah.
Well, they're learning from you as much as. Yeah. I mean, as you were saying, the difference between a briefing where they're downloading to you and an inquiry where you're trying to get information from them. It's important, but as you're pointing out, it's like they can kind of work somewhat hand in hand. It's all an exchange of information, and yes, you can influence them, and hopefully then they can influence the clients. Yeah. So actually, you mentioned a good experience, but a positive experience. But do you have any others that?
Yes, absolutely. What I enjoy, because I love our craft, right, and I love talking about our craft and whatever it is that we're working in. It's working with anybody who's truly passionate and curious about what they do, right, over opinion or ego. Like there was one time I had lunch with an analyst, and all he talked about was the fact that he was fighting to keep his little space within the big firm he worked in, and it was all about him. But so for example, I've done some work with Teresa Wrigley. She's been on the show. She's a DAM analyst, and she's a really good example of that passion, right? She doesn't care about her opinion or ego. She knows what's right in her mind, and she has a huge amount of experience. And she's a great speaker. And when I was at Accenture, and she's super curious about what you're doing, but she's not shy about giving you honest feedback. So you get the good and the bad, right? There's no point in working with an analyst who just says, "Oh, this is great. Thank you very much. Book me for your speaky slot," or sponsor our research. Something that actually tells you how it is in a really nice, friendly way. I love that. And they tell you that because they're passionate about the category rather than about their own personal ego. I love that. Anyway. Yes. So over to me again, as I look at the notes. So, Jeff, you're putting your different hat on now, mate. As an influencer, what was the worst experience you had with a vendor, and what did you learn from that?
So, I think the worst experiences, is when you get into these, trendy markets, or something within a market becomes, the buzz. And it's just like, you're, so, I mean, I've been, when I was at Serious Decisions and Forrester, I was on lots of briefings that had to do with marketing attribution or analytics or marketing resource management or digital asset management, as you're just talking about. And it was just like, it was so easy to see when somebody is kind of going out of their way to jump on another bandwagon, like, customer experience, or like AI, or like customer data platforms. It's like at one point, everybody that had anything to do with attribution or data management or just providing lists became the CDP, the customer data platform. And it's like, this is where, you've got to, as an influencer, you've really got to ask the vendors to be honest about, and you get back to some of the topics we always talk about. So what are the customer needs that you're seeing? What are you meeting today? What's your roadmap to meet new needs? What do you see the new needs are, and what's your roadmap? And as opposed to like getting, all up in the buzz, it's sometimes you may want to, as the analyst, you may want to say, well, maybe you should wait to catch up to the hype cycle because, people aren't going to be buying that shit just yet anyway. So
I think this is a really strong topic, and there's a good balance here. And the other thing is, when you said the TLAs, I was thinking one of the worst experience maybe of working with an analyst is dealing with this made up TLA shit, that sort of contrivance between vendor and analyst, that all of a sudden everything's a DXP and nobody's managing content anymore, all that shit. But anyway, I've digressed. I think this is really, because the thing I think from an influence perspective, you want to know sometimes the point of view and the hype, right? Is, say, like at the moment we're all talking about AI, you want to know, well, what's the vendor's point of view in this latest thing, just in case somebody I'm advising asks me about it. But you don't want that to be the sole message that you get during an hour and a half briefing, do you? You don't want to be banged over the head with AI when you're trying to figure out, well, how do you actually manage digital assets, or how do you manage marketing resources or something? I think it's a really important point. Sorry.
I was going to turn the table on you and say, as an influence, what was your
well, the
experience?
The funny thing is, in preparing this, and you asked that question, I thought our answers were very different, but they're the same, actually, because when I was an analyst, it was trying to convince vendors they should show me a demo, show me the product, show me their differentiation, and not show the same slides everybody else was showing, because that was exactly what you were saying about the hype cycle. So it was like, something's hot in the category right now. Let's hit him over the head with an hour and a half of slides on what's hot. I've already had 5 of those. What I want to know is your unique position, your unique differentiation. And I also want to see the product, because that is what you're going to recommend to a client, right?
Yeah.
The other little pet peeve, and this might tease a little bit on the ego of an analyst, even when I was one, is when people don't bother to do any research into you. They don't bother looking you up on LinkedIn. They don't look at what you might care about. They don't look at what you've been writing about. And I think that is so fucking lazy, because it's so easy to do, right? And you can really sort of build that human-to-human connection by saying, oh, you wrote about this. That's really interesting, customer engagement, and then weave into that. And if you're in analyst or influencer relationships, you totally got to do that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I've banged on too long. I keep talking about the time, but yeah. So, last question, because we're going to do 2 of each, right? So this is the last one. Jeff, with your influencer hat on, what was the best experience you had working with a vendor?
Well, so at Serious Decisions, I was, each of us kind of owned a particular tech category that we were writing about. And so one of the ones I had was marketing resource management. And so I was doing a lot of work in trying to define, we kind of called them capabilities, customer needs, same thing. Let's get into the details. Like when you're doing with MRM, which is kind of like this multifaceted platform, what are the capabilities people are looking for as they're trying to automate workflow? What are they looking for in managing assets? What are they looking for, in terms of reporting and budget management? And so I got into these conversations with these different, vendors about it's like, here's what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? I can share with you my list of capabilities in these various areas. Can you give me information? And there was one vendor that I really kind of hooked onto who, we ended up having such good exchanges. They brought me in for like a day-long workshop to, one, help me learn about new capabilities, but then offer them feedback on how to message it. And it's, so, I mean, I think to an extent, this is like what we've kind of been talking about being honest and having that two-way sharing of information. Yeah. You're not going to, or you shouldn't be telling them anything you wouldn't tell any other competitor, any other vendor who might be a competitor of theirs. But on the other hand, if the vendor is good at working the relationship, they're going to try to get more out of you, as opposed to some that may be pulling the wool over your eyes because they're trying to act like they're making advances in the market when in fact they're really not.
Yeah, and it's easy to see through that sometimes, isn't it? And also, like when people are working you in such a way that it's obvious that they're trying to work you, and trying to influence you, or schmooze you or whatever, and it's all bullshit. So yeah, I think it's
so. From your point of view, how about you? What was your best experience?
I have a very simple one, luckily, because we're running out of time. It's not so much when I was an analyst, although I think this is a common theme of both working in both places, but as an advisor, I think it's working with a passionate CEO who has a point of view, working with and I'm working with vendors that are on a mission, and there's something really to get your teeth into and to talk about and engage with, rather than feature functions and all that kind of stuff. People that really get it and have a passion for it. And sometimes it's like I was saying about the CEO who argued with the analyst. Sometimes that passion can be misplaced. But I think they're the best people to talk to as an analyst, people who are genuinely passionate about that category. Because I think you get so much insight there, and they're so open, and you get access to their customers and all that good stuff.
Oh yeah,
and that's when it really clicks.
Yep.
All right, mate. So that's the conclusion of this particular conversation. So I hope the not one of our normal 5 effing fundamentals, but I'm sure we'll get to the 5 effing fundamentals.
We could probably pull 5 things out of this, throw an F in front of it.
Absolutely. Now you're going to be on holiday for 2 weeks.
Yes.
So sorry to the listeners who are going to miss you, Jeff. And
I'll miss them too.
So I think you're back on the 5th of August.
Yep.
And it's only polite for me to let you choose the song and not even influence the song or anything like that, but just let you choose the song. What's the song?
Well, we're talking about influencers, and you've chosen not to influence me. So I wanted to pull Bad Influence by the B-52s in 1992. Break out of the mold before the mold sets in. It's kind of like it's kind of like a lesson thing. It's like, don't be taken over by bad influence. And I'm not sure, they were probably talking about drugs or something like that, but we're going to talk about technology.
Man, that's what we pulled together, Rockstar CMO, the Rockstar and the CMO. I love that. Thanks, mate. And so I will see you in a couple of weeks, and I'll play out with Bad Influence by B-52 from 1992. Have a great holiday, my friend.
Thank you very much.
I'll see you back in the studio.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeff, and that was a little bit of the B-52s, a Bad Influence. Jeff will be back with his Good Influence in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, let me know what topics I should pick his brains with. You know where to find us, rockstarcmo.com. Right, time to welcome back Todd Irwin, Chief Strategy Officer and founder of New York-based brand strategy and creative agency Phaser, who brings his 30 years of brand strategy experience to the show for the 3rd time. Always a pleasure to catch up with Todd. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome back, Todd, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Ian. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. It was really, it's really fun to catch up with you again. You were last on episode 145, which I don't know where the time is going this year, but yeah, that's quite some time ago. But for the listeners that didn't hear episode 145, tell us a bit about yourself.
So I am the Chief Strategy Officer at a brand strategy agency called Phaser, F-A-Z-E-R, in New York City. Although I shouldn't say that we're from New York City. We're virtual. We've got people in London. We've got people in Boston, Charlotte, all over the place. We've actually gone 100% virtual. But yes, we're a brand strategy agency. Do mostly foundational brand strategy work for companies of all sizes. Yeah. Happy to be here again, man. How are you? Everything good with you?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much. I'm still plugging away with this old podcasting lark. So,
all right. I love this podcast.
It gives me the chance to talk to people like you, which is always great. And so, Phaser, so you work with brand. What sort of companies do you usually work with?
We're not sectorized. For us, it's more about our methodology, our construct, how we approach positioning brands in markets. I think at the core of what we do is foundational brand positioning and then building story, narrative, and identity around that. We look really closely at markets and help brands figure out how they can compete better. Bottom line.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's the reason well, I mean, there are many reasons I can have you back on, Todd, because I always enjoy a conversation with you. But for the people that know anything about my day job, I'm the CMO of an acquisitive B2B software company. And I'd read that you'd been doing some work handling brand mergers and pulling companies together and figuring out what you're going to do with the brand with those. And I thought to myself, I ought to catch up with Todd. Yeah. I understand you guys do a lot of work in that area. What sort of things do you work on when it comes to M&A and acquisitions and that stuff?
A lot of the companies that come to us are going through some sort of merger or acquisition. So, the reason behind why companies want to do some sort of brand refresh or brand transformation is that they've gone through, some sort of business change. They've acquired companies. They have to figure out how to merge those companies into the master company or the holding company, or figure out how to take those companies that they've acquired and merge them into a master brand, and really just figure out like how to strategize that from a brand standpoint. How does it affect their customers? How does it affect their employees or team members? Yeah. And it's actually quite complicated because it's not just customers and team members, but it's also the products too. Yeah. And a lot, I would say a lot of the time it's about, we're going to acquire this company, not just for the people and the revenue, but there's a specific like hero product that they want to acquire. So, yeah, that's where we get involved.
But it's so tied to the emotion of the company, isn't it? I mean, that's the idea of great brand building anyway, but people feel it. So you start tinkering with the brand when you're bringing people together. It's a challenge, isn't it? Is that what you find as well?
Yeah, I mean, it all has to do with customer perception and loyalty. Customers have strong emotional attachments to brands, and those attachments influence their perception of and loyalty to a company. Yeah. So during a merger or an acquisition, it's important to manage branding in a way that retains and attracts customers. The failure to do so can lead to a massive loss of customers and subsequent revenue if it's not done carefully. It's got to be precise. It's got to be planned. That's why we get hired. Yep. Yeah.
Do you also find, not just with the customers, but internally, like you're bringing these two organizations together, and brand is like the tribal flag that they all carry around, and some of that internal stuff is sometimes a challenge. Do you see? I mean, I've seen it in my career for sure, and I don't work for the massive brands that you guys work with, just B2B software companies, but I sometimes see that with people. They identify so much with the brand, bringing those people together operationally is tough.
Yeah, it's that employee morale. Right. And then for leadership, it's about retention. Like, employees, just like customers, identify with the brand they work with or work for, represent. When there's an abrupt change during a merger and acquisition, it can cause discomfort, uncertainty amongst those employees. So effectively managing branding during the process of that M&A, that's all about how companies can assure their employees and maintain that morale and limit that turnover. So that's what chief executives, executive leadership teams are really looking to do.
Yeah. And one of the things I've heard, so I've been in companies that have been acquired. I've been in companies that have done the acquiring, and mentioned that just a moment ago. And the term I hear a lot is brand equity. Everybody claims they have brand equity, and this is why that you shouldn't fuck with what we do because we have brand equity, right? How do you, and you do this at a much bigger level with much bigger brands. How do you look at that? How do you measure that unique value of the acquired brand and judge and measure it?
The judging and measurement in branding isn't as precise as with performance marketing, where you can actually look at numbers and see things go up and down. But without a doubt, value and value creation when it comes to mergers and acquisitions is at the forefront. We are constantly working with VCs and private equity companies that are looking to use branding as a value creator to double, triple, quadruple the value of a brand. And they do that also through M&A. The bottom line is that a strong brand creates significant value, and they serve, as assets that contribute to a company's bottom line. Brand drives business growth. So during a merger or an acquisition, an effective strategy maximizes the value, right? It's the reason we get hired. Measurement, though, is difficult. And if you look, this is, business leaders are constantly debating this, what's the value of a brand? What's the value of a market? A lot of times, it's made up, but it's all about perception. It is. It really is, Tell the story better and you can sell it for more.
Yeah. So, and that's the point you're making there, isn't it? That a company with a strong brand in an M&A situation is going to have more value as a company because it has a strong brand, right? It's almost like it's something on the balance sheet.
100,000% yes.
And yet it's this thing that's really hard to measure. So how does that work in the sort of area where you work, where it's kind of like, are you helping? So you're mostly helping people sort of post that period, right? So the M&A has happened and now you go figure this out. Is that where you end up?
Yeah, this is really the intangible part of it. You've got people like Elon Musk who are talking about the value of Twitter or the value of Tesla, and he's just, a lot of it is his personal opinion, but it's also his personal opinion as to what the story is behind the brand and that vision, and the vision drives value. We talk a lot about, when we're doing brand work and brand strategy work, the idea of deep storytelling and its effect on valuation. And we work with a lot of different types of VCs. Some are more aggressive, some are more conservative. The ones that are more aggressive push valuation farther. The ones that are more conservative are looking more at spreadsheets. So yeah, it's true. But it really is about perception, and I think it's about storytelling. 100%.
Yeah. I love that point because the storytelling thing I think is important when you're acquired, because I've worked for a company. I've been acquired, and then if you get acquired and the company that's acquired you has already got the story in place for why they've made that acquisition, rather than just be financial, I think it greases the wheels, doesn't it? If that story is already in place.
Yeah, a big part of the work that we do is finding the stories, not just with the brands, but with the products, bringing everything together into one cohesive story, and then telling it in a way that's organized. So there's with brand positioning, right? If you've read any of, Acker's books on brand positioning, it's about finding that singular idea. But below that singular idea, there's that deep brand story that a company needs to tell. The deeper we see this, and we have seen this for years, is that the deeper you go, the more valuable it is, the more you attract customers. And specifically for companies that are going through M&A, give it a reason, and also increase the value. So
yeah. And do you think some of the and do you then have to sort of align the values and stuff of particular brands? I don't know enough about your customers, and I know that before we were chatting, it was like I can't mention them at the moment. But when you're working with a client, do you sometimes find that they've made an acquisition that's got a slightly different set of brand values, and you need to then align those? Like, I don't know, if Patagonia bought, I don't know, something else, then everything needs to then come into the Patagonia family. I'm just picking them as the most obvious brand choice that everybody seems to be talking about at the moment. Yeah. Is that the sort of work you need to do as well? Get those values right?
Absolutely. Brand values are critical. And, I can't say that I can think of a time where there were conflicting brand values from one acquired company to the company that was, acquiring it, but they definitely have different brand stories.
Yeah.
And so you need to merge one story into the next. I was talking to one of my strategists recently about, it's like taking two songs and using a verse from one song and plugging into a verse of a different song, right?
Yeah.
You gotta, it's still, that one song still has to work.
Yeah.
So, and that's constantly what we're doing. We're taking stories, merging them together and creating cohesive stories for brands. So.
No, I love this. I love this work that you're doing. So what's the approach you take? How do you decide which parts of the song from one brand to take and which parts from another? I mean, there must be a level of work and research. I know you were just saying there isn't, a lot of data around the value of brand, but and you can't all run on gut feel all the time. But how do you then decide, look, these are the core things I need to keep about this brand?
Yeah, I mean, the way that we do it is, positioning is at the core. So whether we're positioning the master brand and looking to take those acquired companies, acquired brands, and interjecting them into a master brand and creating that one cohesive brand story, or even with product strategy, we take the same approach where we're looking at how is the product positioned in the market. And if you're acquiring other products from those acquired companies, then how do those new products either merge into other products or create new products for that master brand that's doing the acquiring? And so from a positioning standpoint, and I know we spoke about this last time, was, the way we approach it is we do a lot of depositioning work.
Yes.
So we're looking at competitors and we're looking at customer pain points and trying to figure out how do we solve to that pain point so that it shines a negative light on competitors. We do the same exact thing for product strategy as well. So we're constantly taking that construct and applying it to master brands. We're applying it to product strategy. It's at the height of everything that we do.
So it all aligns from top to bottom, from the acquiring big brand down to the product they've just brought in through the acquisition, right? So
that's correct.
Is there a point in which sometimes you have to think, oh, well, the brand that's been acquired, it's better if we just keep totally separate and that the consumer doesn't know that it's owned by this new brand? Or is it always for you about joint value between the master brand, I think you referred to it, and the product? Or is there any times where you have to make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some times when a company has a brand architecture where they act not only as a standalone company, but they also act as a house of brands, where they might make an acquisition where a company becomes a partner brand. And then the strategy becomes, well, do we want to communicate that partner brand is sponsored by somehow a part of the master brand company? And it does happen quite often. It has to do with that sort of positional master brand strategy. But yes, we absolutely do that.
But it just starts to, I mean, do you find that then, I mean, it must be really interesting to sit in those rooms that you sit in, because you've got a whole committee of people that presumably have their own sort of interests that they want to be represented in this brand strategy. Do you ever find yourself like, this is just too fucking complicated, guys? It has to be called this. It can't be this, sponsored by this with a bit of this on the side. It has to be, this is the brand now.
Yeah, it happens quite a bit. I mean, we typically take a close look at what the business strategy is first, right? So the brand strategy has to align with the business strategy. But we had an instance about 2 years ago with a fintech company where they were, they hired us because they were doing a merger, and they were going to take the company that they were merging with and turn that company into the master brand.
Right.
And when we looked closely at the market, we saw that their brand actually was what the client wanted, but it was because the other company was the bigger company. They felt that they should be the master brand. So we were like, okay, listen, here's the customer, here are the competitors, here's what the customer's looking for. This one brand that is solving the pain points, and also had the best brand story. So the work that we did on the brand strategy side actually influenced their approach to how they had originally saw the strategy, and it changed. So they ended up flipping their strategy because of the brand strategy work that we did.
Oh, that's,
so it happens.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear it in my way. You've really got to be dispassionate in a way, haven't you, about when you have that strategy, you assume, oh, the bigger one is going to take over, or this is going to, you've really got to focus on what the customer's feeling about that brand and how they perceive that brand in market, right? And it's not always going to be the biggest one. It's going to be the one they care about the most, isn't it?
Right, exactly. What's the most, who's going to deliver the most relevance?
Yeah.
And you have to think in terms of, the market, the customer, what do they want to buy? How do they feel? Who's solving their pain points? And what's the best strategy to get them to choose you over the competitors?
Yeah.
It's really that simple.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of subjective opinions by leadership teams based on what their background is and where they come from. So a lot of politics goes into it. I mean, there have been some, a few Fortune 500 projects that we've done where it gets really, really complicated on the politics side. You've got divisional presidents, VPs, they all have like personal stakes in the company, have to get involved. And those things actually play into the decision making, and they shouldn't. No. It should be all about what's the most important thing about brands. Leave your personal politics out of it. But brand strategy agencies, they have to navigate those relationships, and it makes it complicated. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was alluding to at the beginning, because I've seen that just in a small way in some of the organizations I've worked in my career, that because their brand was on their business card and then the VP of blah-de-blah brand, then they care deeply about it. And it's very personal to them, very emotional about them. But the best thing for the company is actually for everybody to move forward, and it's going to change for everybody, right? So
exactly.
It's not winners and losers. I love that. Yeah. All right, so we're coming up to time. I can't believe this already, Todd. I'm going to come to our last question, and this conversation was great last time we were on. And so last time when you were on the podcast, you threw brand purpose into our Rockstar CMO swimming pool, which all the listeners know is our portal to marketing hell. It's been a few months since we chatted. Are you sticking with that?
Yes, absolutely. I want to clarify something about brand purpose is that I think it's important. I really do. Yeah. The problem is that a lot of companies want to lead with brand purpose, and it isn't the most important thing when it comes to what the customer is looking for. So do I want to, excuse my French, do I want to shit on brand purpose? No, I do not. But because I do think it's very important. Sometimes it's the second most important thing. But without a doubt, the most important thing is figuring out customer pain points. How do you solve them? Right. And then how do you solve them in a way that makes customers want to buy into your brand?
No, I'm with you, man. And it also, it's about your relevance in that conversation, isn't it, depending on what the purpose is. I mean, if you're completely irrelevant to the conversation, don't go there.
Right. And that ultra relevance comes from solutions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely love it. Thanks for coming back on the show, Todd. I really enjoyed that conversation. It's really important to understand, brand is such an emotional thing. And when you're in a merger and acquisition situation, we've got to deal with it internally and externally. So that's really good to get your insight. So when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you, mate?
The agency is called Phaser, F-A-Z-E-R. The website is phaser.agency, F-A-Z-E-R.agency. You can find us pretty easily. We're there. All right,
and I'll include links to you and your agency in the show notes. Thank you very much for coming on again. I'll speak to you soon, mate.
Ian, great to see you, man.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you too. Cheers.
Thank you, Todd. Great topic. We'll definitely have him back in a couple of weeks and dive a bit more into that whole branding thing. Right, it's time to wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and join my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar, and welcome to the weekend.
Yes.
It has been a long week, I think, for both of us, as it were. You perhaps a bit longer week than the average bear. Won't go into that necessarily, but you can certainly go into it if you'd like to. But what we have, hopefully, this week is something to bring you into the weekend with a bit of a health tonic, as it were. But yeah, it's hot here. I know it's been hot there, and all of a sudden people are going, oh yeah, climate change. It might be real, because it is friggin' hot. And so for the bar, for the drink that we have this evening, we have something that is related to something that we've had in the bar before. You'll remember at one point we made something called ranch water.
Oh, yes.
And ranch water is a very specific Texan drink. Yes. From my childhood. Not that I was drinking in childhood, but not that I wasn't either, to be honest. But it is of course, tequila and a very specific brand of sparkling water called Topo Chico. Well, this cocktail is a vodka-based cocktail, and it's also good for a hot summer day. And it's very refreshing as a summer drink to sort of cool off just a bit. And it's also really good if you don't like overly sweet drinks, which of course you know that I don't. Yep. And so it's called the Chilton cocktail. Ooh. And what we want is a little bit of coarse salt. And you can basically, what you're going to do is salt the rim of the glass. So you can do that by either putting a lime or a lemon around the glass rim, and then dipping, of course, the rim of the glass into a plate that has that coarse salt on it, and that gives you your nice salt rim. Then you have a lemon wedge, of course, and lemon over lime here. I'm gonna recommend, although lime is fine as well.
Yes.
And then a little bit of freshly squeezed lemon juice into that glass, and then 1.5 parts, 1 ounce. Whatever's your flavor of vodka. I like. I am a vodka snob, so I'm going to go with a premium vodka here because I think premium vodkas are better. Mm-hmm. And then this is where we add, and it looks a little like the ranch water, which is the sparkling mineral water. Topo Chico is a great one here because it also has that sort of citrusy taste to it. And so basically you end up with sort of a very refreshing salt-rimmed vodka, lemon, and sparkling water, and it's just absolutely fantastic.
That sounds amazing. I wonder where the name came from.
The name itself basically originated in Lubbock, Texas, so very much like the ranch water, and I'm going to assume, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm just going to make it up. I am like ChatGPT, I just make up facts.
That become truths. That
it was basically someone who ran out of tequila and said, hey, what else can we put in this thing? And maybe, hey, I've got some vodka. Let's do that.
That's nice. It sounds English to me because the Chilterns is a set of hills that isn't terribly far away from where I live. So
I see.
Yes, it sounds very... Anyway, so I shall attempt, as I have done for the last 100 weeks, to make this very drink just using the ingredients of my desktop bar. So as you may have heard, I put some ice already in my glass. I assumed we had ice because it's fucking hot there, right? Sorry, it's quite hot.
Oh, yes, indeed. This is a very, very much an iced drink, yes.
Yeah, I was using the meteorological terms there for heat. And I've obviously put in here some of the most English of vodkas, which would be, of course, Hendrick's Gin. And what else we put in there? Oh, the Topo Chico. Okay, excellent. Well, we both know from our previous experience with Topo Chico is the very best Topo Chico that you can buy in England is, of course, cucumber tonic water by the good people at Fever Tree. Yes. And I shall sample this. This looks very refreshing. That is delicious, Robert. I could drink one of these every week. And what are we calling that?
I suspect you might, yeah.
What do we call that?
We call that a Chilton.
Very nice. And you called it a health tonic just a moment ago. And just to share the thing you were alluding to with the listener just a moment ago is, yes, I got COVID this week. So a health tonic is exactly what I need.
It'll cure what ails you. I guarantee you that.
Yeah. Well,
if nothing else, it'll put you to sleep.
Yes. So, where will we be taking these wonderful health tonics?
Well, I think we need to take these health tonics. Have you been, you being all world traveler and European and all of that, have you been to Ibiza?
I have not. No.
Have you seen the new Wham documentary on Netflix?
I'm a huge fan of Wham back in the day, man. Yeah, absolutely.
I am too.
Yeah,
I am too.
Absolutely.
Have you seen the documentary?
Yes.
It is. I mean, you talk about a friendship, right? Talk about a remarkable, extraordinary friendship of those two.
Yeah.
Those two. So anyway, I won't spoil it. It's a great documentary, but of course, their big leap came when they went and did some music videos down in Ibiza.
Yeah.
And they showed the footage from that, and I went, that looks amazing. So I think we have to get down to Spain, get to Ibiza, sit on a beach, put our toes in the water, see all of the glitterati of celebrities, and drink these Chiltons.
Yeah, very nice. I think I might be the only English person who's never been to Ibiza, I think. And I had to think for a moment because I've been to lots of
It seems to be a very popular place for English vacations.
It is. I've been to all the other ones. I've been to Mallorca, Tenerife, everywhere else. I just haven't been to... Anyway, so this is wonderful. And we're sitting drinking these. These are perfect for a scene like that. And then when we've finished chatting about our love of Wham, when the conversation turns to marketing, what are we going to be chatting about this week?
Well, I mean, thank goodness there's something other than AI for us to talk about, which of course is the remarkable rise of Threads. And I know you've just recently signed up for the Threads, have you not?
Yes, I was on there on day 2, which is very unlike me. But yes, I have very few followers, but I was almost straight away after the announcement on quite early doors, which is a little bit of coolness for me. Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's remarkable, of course, everything that has seen, as we record this, somewhere around 108 million users, quite honestly, in 2 weeks, which is just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I've been doing is looking at sort of the trend here. And, when you start looking at the value created, I think there's 2 interesting things for us to look at as marketers here. And so first of all, obviously it's way too early to predict success for this platform, right? I mean, it's been out a week and a half and we're, with 108 million users, you go, wow, that's fantastic. They've reached critical mass, but we'll see if it lasts for the rest of the year and all of that. And they've said that they're not even going to monetize for this year. If they monetize with advertising at all, it won't be until early next year. And I think that's smart because they're going to try and see if it sticks. But the interesting thing here is that I just did some back of the envelope math, and if one of the major metrics for a media company metric is something they call ARPU, which is, of course, average revenue per user.
Yeah.
And if you look at something like Facebook in the US and Canada, for example, the ARPU is $48 a year, which is, a quarter. And that's an incredible number, right? That's just incredible. Now, obviously, much more of a comp here would be a Twitter ARPU, right? If we look at Threads. And so Twitter's ARPU right now, quarterly ARPU, is around $5, right? So maybe even lower now since Elon has really taken things private and really screwed the company up. But at one point when there were public numbers last year, it was around $4.96, about $5. Well, if you think about that just for a second, so let's use $5 as a nice average quarterly ARPU if they were choosing to monetize the platform. That means that literally in 2 weeks, Meta has created a $2 billion revenue business.
Yeah, amazing.
Just overnight, literally overnight. Now, of course, all the caveats exist, blah, blah, blah. Do they keep it engaged? Can they monetize it? Will people stay? All of those things are but just even the theory of that is incredible. And the aha moment it gives me, and this is what we can really talk about, is it's the power of a subscribed and engaged audience. Because and this is something I posted on LinkedIn as well as Threads. I said, look, the magic here, the magic of what happened here is when you ask yourself, how do you get 100 million subscribers in 2 weeks? Well, you start with 2.3 billion the week before, right? And so it was as easy as saying yes. Yeah. And that's the learning here. Yeah. Because what so many businesses, when we think about content marketing and we think about building a media oriented or a subscribed audience to our business as a product or a service brand, our immediate brains go to building that first audience, which is hard and it's sweaty and it's difficult and we struggle at it, and it takes years for us to build a minimum viable or at least a maximum viable audience. Yeah. But the second one is easier, and the third one is easier still, and the fourth one is easier still, because you start with that audience asset to begin with. And there's a great example of this in front of us. Just, of course, the Threads is like illustrating it perfectly, but we often talk in content marketing about the Cleveland Clinic. Yeah. And the Cleveland Clinic, of course, huge case study when it comes to content marketing. They built their Health Essentials blog starting in 2013. And by, last year, they're getting, tens of millions of visitors every month. They've monetized it through advertising and sponsorship. Mm-hmm. They're making millions of dollars of revenue every year from their blog. So it's a marketing department that pays for itself. Mm-hmm. But when they launched their second platform, and that took 10 years for them to build that level of value. But their health library, which they launched about 4 years ago, immediately, like on day one, started with 200,000 visitors almost from the very beginning. Yeah. Because why? They had a great lead-in audience, right? They already had an audience that was ready, willing, and could just say yes to looking at the health library. It's just a different topic, a different part of their journey from a brand they already trust that's delivering them great content. And by now, in 2023, simply 4 or 5 years later, from the launch, they now have 2 million monthly visitors, and they're starting to monetize it as well. Yeah. So the second one was exponentially easier. And what I've been talking with brands about is, like, if you've got 25,000 people in your email database, or you've got 50,000 in your email database, how many of them are true audiences? In other words, are subscribed to you and take action and like what you're giving them and are, valuing what you give them? Because that audience is your core audience. And if you can grow that to a certain percentage of your total addressable market, well, then, maybe your blog doesn't provide all the value that you want, but then you launch that podcast, or you launch that resource center, or you launch that digital magazine, or you launch something else. You don't have to start from scratch. You're starting from an already built-in audience that's getting some value. Now you're just adding value and adding to the stickiness and engagement of that audience. And you're starting with a head start, so it just gets easier. And that's the learning that we can take from this, and why it's such an important thing to build our own media audience.
And also, apart from building upon the audience, love this, the other thing that, of course, Threads has done really well, or Meta have done with that, is they're offering, and this is something I think that a lot of sort of SaaS platforms can learn from, isn't it? Is they've created a adjacent product that is not only attractive to their existing audience, but will also attract more, a broader audience, or a different audience, right? So Twitter people aren't necessarily Insta people, but it's attracted Twitter people into Threads that perhaps weren't Insta people, and the Insta people are moving on to Threads. See what I mean? It's like you're just extending that offering.
And there's probably a little bit of both of that, right? I mean. But and what's interesting is, to me, is that, and I'll just chalk myself up here as a case study, is that for those of us who, Instagram was okay. Like, I've never been a big Instagram user. I only use it for my, vacation photos occasionally. It's like I was looking, it's like I post a picture on Instagram maybe once every 2 months. Right. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. And so what did I not do? I didn't sign up for Instagram verification.
Yes.
And pay the money.
Yeah.
because why? There's no reason for me to. But now that Threads comes along, well, now it's got something that I not only want to expand my usage of, because it can be now part of my business, and I can actually use that social media platform for business as I continue to use Instagram. Well, now it makes me want to get verified because I actually do want to build a following on Threads, and I actually do want to upsell and make this a centralized platform for myself.
Yeah, I did exactly the same. And the thing for me as well, I think that I posted this on Threads, is for me, Facebook was for people I have a sort of a beer with. LinkedIn was for people I'd met in business. Twitter was business, but broadly anybody else, in the community. And I was trying to figure out, where did Threads fit into that whole thing? And for me, it's a Twitter replacement, right? But my Insta and my Facebook audience are not those people that I would have associated with Twitter. And so I'm building from scratch, but also like you, I'm like, oh, suddenly being verified on Insta has a value to me. And you sort of click on the button and go, oh, you're in the wait list because everybody's doing the same thing, right? So it's that's been interesting for sure.
It's it's truly it's just such a smart move, right? And
absolutely.
and the learning that I think we can take from it is is that, because so often what I hear is, oh, my big challenge is building, an audience, and then and then everybody wants us to build something else, and I'm getting unfocused, and now we're trying to build an email newsletter as we build a blog, as we build a thing, and of course, what we talk about all the time is focusing in on one, getting really good at one platform first.
True.
But there's often sort of a missing component of that to say, well, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to get good at one platform first? What does it mean, And once we achieve some level of success, and I would measure that success by the number of subscribed, engaged audience members that we have, when we do start that second piece, we just need to remind ourselves that we're not going to be starting from scratch, because that owned media audience is going to be there to help us amplify. I mean, I've talked to a B2B company the other day, and they had, 25,000, roughly 26,000 subscribers to their email newsletter who'd signed up. It's for their thought leadership stuff. It's a lovely newsletter, and it's been going okay for them.
Yeah.
But then when they launched their podcast, they immediately converted about 10% of those into podcast listeners. And the podcast has been an incredible success for them to get engagement, and to get more leads, and to get more interest and in depth. And so now they've got sort of a stratified owned media audience with their podcast as well as their email newsletter. So now podcast is classically not an owned media property, right? It's more of a rented land situation. So, but it doesn't matter, because you're renting the land for your owned media audience. And so now you can really track those things, and it becomes much easier to do so.
Yeah. No, and I quite like the way that we both approach this Threads thing. You're from the audience perspective, and I'm looking at it from the product perspective, but probably given our different backgrounds. But that's absolutely right. And yes, and it's like a ratchet, isn't it? Once you build audience, you can build the next audience much easier than the previous audience. It's really good.
Yeah, indeed.
Cool. All right. Well, that's fabulous. So when people are looking for advice on how to build their audience ratchet, where might they go for that, Robert?
You can reach us at the content advisory. I should just say contentadvisory.net.
Yes.
It's just our little website there. As you can tell, I'm highly dissatisfied with our website. We're in the process of thinking the redesign and all of that kind of stuff, and the future of what the website should look like. And we're a little bit of cobbler's kids there for sure. But it is and will change. And the real key there is that in the meantime, that's where you can get all of our lovely thinking, and then of course you can get me on LinkedIn or Threads. I'm at Robert Rose on Threads. Connect on Threads.
Nice. Yeah. You preempted my little "where will we find you" when we spin the dial on the interwebs. But I'll use that time to say I'm also on Threads. I'm Ian Truscott on Threads, if anybody wants to find me there. So thank you very much. And the most important thing for me, apart from finding us both on Threads, will we find you in the bar next week?
You will indeed.
I look forward to it, my friend. I'll see you then. you, Robert. And please, despite what he says about his website, check out his links in the show notes. So that's a wrap on episode 175 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Jeff, Todd and Robert for sharing their experience. You can find all their links in the show notes along with our blog, newsletter and all of our previous episodes on rockstarcmo.com. And thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. Please let us know what you think via the socials. Drop us a rating or review in your podcast app or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, I'll be doing something different with Jeff away, but Robert will be definitely back in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. And until then, have a great week, and I hope you can join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.